Hi, and welcome to this installment of Frank and Mary here in Hudson. If you haven't seen the show before, my name is Art Bergeron. My day job is working as an elder law attorney at Myrick O'Connell. But if you've seen the show, you know this is not about my day job. It's about my friends Frank and Mary and their goal, which is to live in their house until they die and be buried in the backyard. And if that's Hudson, that means right here. They don't want to move away. They like it here. And so the point of the show is to talk about the people that you need to know and the programs that you need to know about in order to do exactly that, in order to stay in your home and just live in your house until you die. So my wonderful co-host, John Parent, joined me last year because most of you folks know John because he's been a selectman now. This is his 6th year. And he's been able to find a lot of great guests that we could talk to about kind of current issues and things that are going on here in Hudson. But today we decided that we would just talk to each other. And I'm going to talk to him about what's going on with the Board of Selectmen and with upcoming, the town meeting that's coming up fairly soon. And then he's going to talk to me about reverse mortgages and some other issues that are directly related to staying at home. Because I'm doing my seminar this month, which is on the Hudson Cable, is about planning to stay home. And I got a lot of questions from people with issues around those questions. How exactly do you do that? How do you use your home in order to stay at home, which is really kind of the goal. So John, to start, thanks very much for doing this. And,
Sure.
and let's just talk about what's going on with the Board of Selectmen. And, I know we talked a little bit about it ahead of time. What is going on at town meeting this year, because that's going to be coming up fairly soon. And we talked about, really talking to the issues that may be being addressed at that time. And I know certainly people are going to have an interest even now in what you're thinking about in terms of the budget. I know, so for so many folks, last year when COVID hit, people were saying, well, we're going to be okay for this year, which is like right now, but next year is going to be murder. And now you guys are actually starting to look at next year. So any or all of those issues, what's going on?
Okay, well, thank you, Arthur. I appreciate it. I do want to talk a little bit about the budget. And also more importantly, I want to reference 2 warrant articles in particular that are coming up in May. And I want to save some time because I know that you've touched on a lot of legal issues, obviously about staying in your home. But I also want to give you some time to talk about some of the practical issues like financing, home improvements, or ongoing maintenance on the house. So let me start, and please stop me so that I have an opportunity to spend a little time asking you some questions as well. Let me touch on the budget first. We've been through all of the departments with the exception of the school department, which we always give as much time as possible. So they're the last ones. And the school department historically always cooperates with the town, and they'll come in at a percentage increase, I'm sure, that we can live with. So what's happened? What's going on with the budget? What are we and what were we concerned about? And the primary concern was not so much our revenue that we generate. Over 80% of our revenue comes from property taxes and local receipts. And when I say local receipts, I'm talking about things like excise tax, water bill, sewer bill, those type of receipts. So about 82% of the money that we receive comes from those 2 primary sources. The next largest source is the state. And the state comprises about 17% of our total budget. So it's
I didn't realize it was that high. That's a lot.
It's a significant account. And of course, that includes 2 components primarily. One is the majority of that is for the school, and then we as a town make up the difference. And then the other part of it is what they call general funding, which are dollars that the town can use for whatever purpose it wants and make part of their budget. So our big concern was, how much is that state amount of 17% going down? And we were very pleased to find out that the governor has proposed level funding. So once again, it looks like we're going to be safe for one more year. What we did prior to knowing what the governor was going to do is we in fact cut our budget by 2%. So we had a budget projection, not understanding what kind of dollars we were going to get from the state. We cut it by 2%. So, and we left that. After we found out we were going to get level funding, we said, let's leave the budget at the -2, which brings us down to 1.7% increase this year over last year. And if you look at prior budgets, 1.7% is a pretty good number. And of course, that's reflective of what's going to happen with your taxes as well. And we always want to keep that in mind. So I want to move on, and I want to talk about two warrant articles that we have that are coming up at town meeting. And our town meeting this year is going to be the first Saturday in May. And we're going to have another outside town meeting. It will probably be at 12 o'clock, and it's going to be in the same location that it was last year, and that's at the high school. So the two articles that I want to zero in on, one of which I recommended to the board, and the board unanimously agreed with me, and that was to change the name of the Board of Selectmen to the Select Board. And the reason that I did that is, number one, anything that we can do to show our support for diversity, I'm in favor of, and obviously the other select board members are in favor of that as well. And it's not that the name didn't have a long history attached to it. It's been around for some 400 years. In fact, in 1623, the then town of Dorchester was the first town to establish town government. And what they did is they selected 9 men to represent the town on a day-to-day basis, and thus the term for selectmen. It also shows, I think, our willingness to emphasize diversity. And we also recently had a statement that the town issued, which we all pledged to, and that was to do whatever we can to recognize that discrimination is there. And we want to make sure that whatever we do brings the amount of discrimination down to as low a level as we possibly can. So at a recent board,
I think it's terrific. I think it's great, you know, and it just, as you were saying this, John, I was thinking back to, now I haven't been around for that long, but like 40 years, and I'm trying to remember if I ever remember a Hudson woman selectman or select person. There
was, yeah. You've got to go back a good 20 years or more, and I wish I could remember her name, but I can't off the top of my head. But yes, we have had one woman.
But and they've become more, you know, women have become more prominent among select boards.
Oh, no, I know about it. No question about it.
Right,
so anything that we can do to promote that type of diversity, and quite frankly, that the name change was an easy one because it has absolutely no effect whatsoever on the job of the board. So everything remains the same. It's just an indication of our willingness to try to do what we can where we can. So that is a warrant article, and that has to be approved by the town. And the reason for that is it's a change to our charter. And the charter was enacted by the legislature or approved by the legislature back in 1976. So in order to change that, we need a vote of the town, and we also need to send it back to the legislature to approve our change. And the second, and probably even more important issue to me at this point, because I'm also the chairman of the search committee looking for a new executive assistant. And of course, our executive assistant is essentially a town manager. I was on the board 7 years ago and chairman of the search committee back then, when ultimately we found Tom Moses, who turned out to be just an outstanding executive assistant. He's retiring. We're going to miss him. So we're in the process of trying to find a new manager. And here's the problem. I've been on 4 search committees, 2 looking for executive assistants, 1 looking for a superintendent of schools in Hudson, and another one looking for the superintendent at Assabet. And the two have a residency requirement. The other 2 do not. The one with the residency requirement is the town of Hudson. In our charter, it states that the town manager must be a resident of Hudson within 9 months of seeking office. And this has become just a major, major deterrent to finding qualified people. The problem is people don't want to move unless they have to. And I'm not talking about if we found a manager from out of state, of course, we're going to ask them to move. If we found a good manager who was maybe at the far end of the Cape, something like that, of course, we're going to ask the individual to move. The problem is we have had interested people who qualify, one in particular who is a good candidate, and it turns out that individual lives 2 miles from our town hall. It just makes no sense. You know, as in talking with you a while back, you made the mention that you could live in Hudson and be further than that. So it really makes no sense. There was an obvious reason for doing it at the time in 76. And I think the obvious reason is the feeling that a person has more at stake if he lives in the town. But times have changed significantly. Number one, you do not have to be a resident of the town in order to be part of the community. We have 15 department managers in town. 9 of them do not live in Hudson. And I'm just going to give you 3 examples of why you don't have to live in town in order to be part of the community. Number 1, our school superintendent, Marco Rodriguez. Marco lives in Worcester. If anybody is part of this community, it's Marco. I mean, think about the number of individuals he deals with on a daily basis. Number 2, a very familiar name, Kelly Kalo. Kelly is our Department of Health manager. She lives in Maynard. And third, our Department of Public Works director, Eric Ryder, lives right on the border of New Hampshire. And these are 3 individuals by name who are extremely well known in the town and are very involved in the town. So they're great examples of why you don't have to be a resident in order to be part of the community. The next thing is we have to understand that this is a 3-year at a time job. All of our executive assistants sign a contract. Our contract historically and currently is a 3-year contract. Now, if they do the job, in all likelihood, that contract is going to be renewed for another 3 years, but there's no guarantee of that. So we're asking people to move who are reasonably close to the town to take a chance that they're going to have their contract renewed. Again, very difficult thing to do. And probably one of the most difficult parts of moving are those individuals who might be interested, but they have children in school. And no matter what your age, you always remember the high school days. And imagine pulling your kids, out of school who are starting their high school years or are in the middle, of their high school years. Very, very difficult thing to do. And again, you're moving them potentially within miles of where you live already, in proximity to the town. So it really makes very, very little sense. Another issue is the potential manager may have a spouse who lives the maximum distance from their job that they want to be. And if you were to ask them to move, it might put that spouse in a position where he or she, depending on who it is, may find it that much more difficult to get to work. And finally, I think there's a new impact, and that's the financial impact. Things are different today, financially. I'm going to find out prior to town meeting how many homes we have on the market that, let's say, are in a range that might be attractive to somebody moving in. Let's say 500,000 to 600,000. And I think what I'm going to find is that there's going to be a handful of houses that are in that range. The inventory just simply is not there. So with everything else in consideration, we might also be asking that individual to move, and here's 10 houses that you got to pick from. I mean, it's really it's an inordinate request. So here's the procedure. This will be a warrant article at town meeting, and that first Saturday in May. We need to get a supermajority vote. We need 2/3 of the town to recommend that the warrant article passes. Once that happens, we also have to put it on the ballot the following week, and the town has to vote on it. And then thirdly, assuming that we get the vote a week later, then it goes to the legislature. And the legislature is the least of my concerns because, quite frankly, there's just no good reason why the legislature would not, approve something like this, particularly where it's the will of the people and it really has no impact on any government business or the way that you do business. We are only one of 4, to the best of my knowledge, that even have a residency requirement. And that's out of 351 communities, in the state of Mass. So I'm going to need some help. And the help has got to come from the town residents who go to our town meeting and then that following week go to the ballot and help us. And I'm not saying that we would not ask somebody to move. All I'm asking is that you allow the board to have the privilege of determining whether or not it's necessary for that person to move to Hudson. And in most cases, unless they're from out of state or something like that, it makes very little sense to do that. So that's my plea. And maybe
John, that's a pretty compelling argument. Let me just and I suppose especially now you're just talking about, like, it's for the citizens of Hudson. It's really about helping yourselves. It's about that executive assistant's a big job. You want the top guy, and the notion that you have to kind of leave one hand behind your back because there's a whole set of players you can't even talk to, even if you can offer them the comparable money. And especially in today's households where so many people have got two spouses working and they're living in the middle, to be asking, both spouses basically to be, to be moving. That's kind of like a blast from, it's like the select woman, it's like a blast from the past,
Yep.
and it's something that you really just needs to change. But having said that, so are the Board of Selectmen unanimously in favor of this, or is there any, significant argument opposed to this?
Yes, the board, select board is 100% in favor of this. There is no argument, really. I mean, the only argument that you could possibly make would be that argument about being more attuned to the town if you happen to live here. But if you look at positions like the three that I mentioned and the executive assistant, when you're dealing with people who live in town on a daily basis, after a period of time, people get to know you, you get to know the townspeople through all the various boards and interactions that we have. You very quickly become a part of the community. And the mere fact that you don't own a home in that community has very little to do. In fact, I'd go the opposite way. You can live in Hudson and not know a soul and not be the part of the community in any way, shape, or form. So it just makes very little sense,
right?
Not to do it. It really does.
I think that's a great summary. And so, I think, as you say, it's important for folks to realize they need to be doing two things in order for this to happen, right?
Yeah.
They need to show up at town meeting and vote for this, but then they also have to, vote at the election.
Yeah.
And otherwise you're kind of out of luck. So I think it makes sense to be the reason why I asked about whether there was any opposition was I know one of the things that you and I had talked about was if there were any particular things that are coming up at town meeting in May. We have several shows between now and then. It would be great if there were issues where you think there may be a real kind of a pro and a con, that we can use this as an opportunity to air those, right? Because I think that's one of the really valuable pieces that this show can play, is that now there is no, where print media is so minimal and therefore the reporters who are asking both sides and writing a story about it are so minimal, that this is really the only vehicle to really allow people to hear kind of a pro and a con at the same time, so they can really make up their minds, But it sounds like in this issue, this has become clear to folks, that this is just, yes.
It just makes no sense. And I have to mention one other thing. There was a newspaper article that came out yesterday morning about the search committee. And I did indicate when I was talking to the representative from the newspaper that we did have 34 candidates for the position. And a lot of people are going to say, well, wait a minute, what's the problem if you got 34 candidates? Well, the problem is 17 of the 34 did not meet our basic qualification. So that's the problem. That's the problem.
Pretty much, yes. Yeah, that pretty much answers the question.
And then we also put the remainder into tier 1 and 2, and the tier 2 really were not quite the quality that we're looking for. So there's a problem.
Right, that's a genuine problem. And I think people also appreciate the update on the budget, because I know that there was a tremendous amount of, just fear about, especially among these folks, among the Frank and Marys here, for whom, as I've often mentioned, for many of my clients, next to the food bill, unless they've got serious medical problems, the next biggest bill is the tax bill.
Yeah.
And they've got a valuable house. And the trouble is, John, you guys have made Hudson much too attractive for people. And so the values keep going up, right? Everybody's houses, right? And so that it's been quite something to watch. It's been amazing to watch over the last 5 to 10 years. I mean, if you ever want a case study to me, and once again, as an outsider, I married into Hudson, but I'm not from Hudson, right?
Yeah.
But if you ever wanted a case study in the effect that a changed downtown can have on a town,
yeah,
that's Hudson.
Very true.
That's Hudson,
Very
right?
true.
But as a result of that, you've got, the inventory is really low. You got a lot of young people wanting to move into Hudson,
Yeah.
right? But as a result, people are just, when you sell, that's terrific. But if you're just staying put, it's really tough. Now, John, I know that we had talked a little bit about having a little discussion, and maybe we can do that for our next show, right? About these issues. As I had mentioned to you, the seminar that I did this month was all about planning to stay home. And of course, the problem with the seminars that I do now is that they're all done by remote, so there's nobody who can ask a question. But I always say, call if you've got a question. And a number of people did, specifically about this kind of ambiguity between, how does a home improvement line of credit work? How does a reverse mortgage work? What are my options if I really want to be using the equity in my house to stay home, which is what so many people do. So maybe we can do that. Maybe I'll do that in a segment at one of our later shows. But John, thank you so much for this. I really appreciate I think a lot of folks really appreciate this update. And think about other, if there are particular issues, or to the folks who are watching, if there are particular issues that are coming up that you think are going to be a town meeting that you'd like to really hear pro and con, this is a great place to do it. So,
yeah. Well, I can assure you that with the number of articles we have, there'll be several that will have both pro and con.
Yeah. So let's kind of, you're the selectman. You tell me, and we'll kind of figure out who those people should be. So, folks, I hope you enjoyed this show. I hope you take John's advice. The Board of Selectmen are unanimous in saying this change needs to be made because it's in the charter. It's going to be a big deal. But in terms of the quality of your government, you're helping yourself out. You're helping yourself out by just giving them the flexibility to get the best person to act as their executive assistant. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Thank you very much, John. Folks, thank you for watching, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the next installment of Frank and Mary here in Hudson. Thank you.